Ricken. Right, everybody, welcome back. We are in week 4 of our coding bootcamp. We're doing front end design and development. We've done a number of things up to now, mostly focused on kind of the theories and philosophical approaches of design. Last time, or front end design. Last time we ended by pulling in our static files using the collect static command that's built into Django, which is part of the backend framework that handles all those directories where files are. I want to make sure I'm reiterating the fact that everything we're doing is just files in directories at all times, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we do different things, but it's all boiling down to files in directories. All right, today, day 8, what we're going to do is we're going to continue talking about front-end things, but we're going to talk specifically about frameworks that are useful for front-end things, just like Django is a back-end framework. We're going to talk about some front-end frameworks, and we're going to talk about JavaScript on its own as a special topic. Before we dive into this, are there anything, or do you all have any questions of any of the material we covered up to now? Anything you're stuck on? Anything you're not clear on why we're doing it the way we've done it?
No, I think I kind of understand it.
Understand it fairly well?
Yeah.
All right. So anybody that's not in class today, maybe watching the video, and everybody that's in the class, reach out, email, online, Discord, whatever you want to do, and get in touch and ask questions if you have them. But main idea is, again, make sure that you're understanding why we're doing things the way we're doing them. I don't want you to be left with like, yeah, okay, I kind of get that we do this, but why? I want to make sure we understand the why of things and how everything's kind of connected. So, all right. So yeah, today we're going to be front end frameworks and JavaScript. Before we go too deep into it, this is kind of a variation of one of my favorite memes. Don't worry about the flags. I'm not making any political statements, but this is just to say that all these front end frameworks, these are examples, these little symbols up here. This A is Angular, and then we got React and Svelte, or Svelte, the little S looking thing, and Vue. These are all front end frameworks that are really, really popular, and they're pretty newer than the one that we're going to use today, but they're mostly JavaScript, and it's going to be CSS and JavaScript running in HTML for just about all these front end frameworks, right? So the reason that I show this and the reason that we talk about JavaScript a little bit on its own today is to show sort of what the syntax is. We're not going to go as deep as we did into the Python syntax. It's going to be a little bit of a translation sort of thing between two languages, but JavaScript is the language of the web. Is made very much for internet purposes. You could do the backend things we've done with Django. You could do it with JavaScript backend frameworks. And arguably, it's probably a good idea to use a JavaScript or something like that front end framework because Django is not made for front end stuff. So you may want to use both. But again, keep in mind that whatever choice you're making here between any of these other frameworks is typically going to have all the same stuff. It's going to have JavaScript. It's going to have CSS. It's going to interact through HTML. So that as a visual to kind of help hammer home that point. Like always, this can be. Go ahead.
What's the visual? You're not showing the visual.
I'm not showing anything. I'm not sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Am I just running my mouth, not sharing my screen?
I didn't see any visual.
Maybe I didn't share my screen at all. I'm sitting here explaining everything and not sharing anything. Thank you. Hold on. Let's go back to this and actually share my screen. I'm sorry. So you're talking about things you see no visual.
This is why I was looking for a flowchart.
This is why I'm talking about asking questions. If you hadn't said anything, no one would have seen any visual ever. So thank you for asking the question.
Welcome.
I'm glad I didn't have a ton of it, but it wasn't all that important. So I explained a meme you didn't see. Here we go. All right, now we see the visual. All right, we're sharing the screen. Excellent.
Yeah.
Let's try this again. All right, so we're on a week 4. We're on day 8. Front end frameworks. Here is our visual. All right, again. So this is saying that all these things are just representations. This A up here and this little atom looking thing. These are different front end frameworks. These are logos of those. And the idea is that all of these are really just JavaScript. So we're going to cover a little bit of JavaScript today to familiarize you with it, show you that it's not that different from Python. There are a few more brackets to keep track of and some slightly different ways of writing things, but the concepts of variables, functions, all that kind of stuff is really, really similar. We're going to do a tiny bit of JavaScript to show where it goes. But as a broad concept, we've already done HTML. That's the hypertext markup language that puts things on the page and says where it is. We've done the CSS, which is the colors, the styles of things. JavaScript is making things dynamic, interesting, and giving the user some sort of feedback and interactivity on your site. So that's where JavaScript really fits in. That's what it does really well. So we're
So
going to show one. Go ahead.
if you have a button like we built last time, right?
Yep.
JavaScript would enable if the button was actually did something, right?
Yeah.
JavaScript would be
Yeah. It's so honestly, you asked some of the best questions, man, because you're like about one step ahead of where we're going to be. So what we're going to do in JavaScript is we're going to tie
okay.
to a button a specific function. We're going to do exactly that. So the example that we're going to use is a fairly common use case for JavaScript to give users like a confirmation warning. Are you sure you want to do that kind of thing? And we're going to add exactly that because in our to-do list, when we make our to-do list, we're going to want to have a confirmation that says, are you sure you want to delete this to-do list item? And we're going to put it on our delete button, right? So we're not going to have our delete button yet, but we can set up the JavaScript to do that. And that's what we're going to do at the end of the class today. So as far as framework goes, we're going to do a framework that's old, but still valid. It's called Bootstrap. It's something that Twitter made years and years ago. It's free. It's still something that's used in pretty big projects. These ones I'm showing here on the screen are more modern front end frameworks. We're only going to use the CSS portion of Bootstrap. It also has JavaScript, but we're going to do JavaScript manually for that purpose that I just told you about a button that's going to do something. I'm going to show you again, just like we did last time with the manual CSS, writing CSS, and then putting it into an external file and all that stuff. We're going to do similar stuff with JavaScript. But we're going to start by doing CSS through a framework to show how easy that is and kind of get the idea of frameworks rolling. That all makes sense though?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about that? And again, now that I've shown my supposedly and hopefully helpful visual. All right. Cool. So now I will jump away from that. And we're going to go back over into where we do most of our work in Python Anywhere. We're going to start off in the console, and we are going to be making changes to our project. So I'm going to start out the same way that we always start out, just getting the habit of routines. I'm in the home directory. I'm going to start my virtual environment as the very first thing I do to make sure that I have all the packages I'm going to need later. So I'm in the same place where my virtual environment is, which is called VM in my case. So I do source space VM. I'm using tab complete to make sure that I am in the right place. I hit tab after I hit the first character. I'm going to look for bin and activate. Hit enter to get the name of my virtual environment and my control back for my console. And then let's move into my site directory, which is the top level directory folder for our project. Now,
why does it add the tilde there?
that's
When,
shorthand. This right here,
yeah, when you start
that's
with
shorthand for this. That's shorthand for all of this. So instead of writing all this garbage each time, it just does a tilde.
okay,
And so
okay,
it's standard shorthand. All Linux systems use the tilde to represent your home directory, which is always this.
okay.
So yeah, and you can reference things using that with the tilde as well when you do things with. So like if you know it's your home directory to start with, you can always use that as well on a Linux system. So what we're going to do is use the tree function again, like we've done before, to print out the layout of our directories right now, because it's a really good visual of the directory structure of the project's a little bit better than what's built in the Python Anywhere GUI. So just lowercase word tree space. I'm going to give it some ignore flags. So dash capital I, and then open quotation marks, 2 underscores, and I'm going to put pi cache, one word, all lowercase, 2 more underscores, vertical bar for or, right? And give us some other things. JS for JavaScript, or CSS, or IMG, close off the quotation marks. And the reason I'm doing this again is these filters are going to pull out some stuff that I don't want to see, and it's going to make the tree too large. But this function should give us a breakdown of what it was. And I want to, I'll leave that alone. I'll leave it like that. All right, so it's going to be a little more than can fit on the screen. I'll just scroll up because I don't want to make it too much smaller. So here's a dot to remind you the reference. I could have had it print out the working directory like I did when I hit PWD to do working directory, but this is just a dot to remind everyone that where you are in a working directory can be referenced as a dot. in Linux systems as well. So that's important to keep in mind. But here's just our structure, right? So we have our development database, which we're not going to do anything directly with. We'll start messing around with it a little bit next week. Here's our manage.py in the working directory that we're in. We call that a few times. Here's our my site directory where we do settings, project level URLs. This is where we were messing around yesterday, where we wrote this manually, the my styles, and then we did collect static to pull all of those directories into this main, the static main. Right, and that's where we ended up last time, was running collect static. So we have these here. And the reason for that is because these are project level static files, and today we're going to be adding some application level static files. The button functionality that we were just talking about on confirmation of deleting a task is going to be specific to this application. And that's true of a lot of things. You're going to have having application specific functions, styles, all the static files that we have at this project level. You're going to have some application level ones. So we're going to put those in a directory called static. And when we run collect static, it's going to find all those directories and put them all in here. And then when it's live and on the website, again, it'll serve them all out of one place. So we're going to follow that pattern again today, adding a few of things into this specifically.
Jeff,
Yes.
is there anything special about the name static, or is it just because that's what we configured in settings? I mean, if I called it my junk, could I say
Uh-huh.
collect my junk?
Yeah.
And as long as I've told it what that name is going to be, it just runs and finds that path.
Yeah. Outside of trying to keep this PG, yeah, you could call it that. No, I'm joking. Yeah, you call it really whatever you want to. Static is really just a convention. So it's kind of like we've talked about a few times with some few things. This right here doesn't have to be static, but it is the setting that you told it to find in the static directories, static files directories settings.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the reason that I would encourage using some version of static is it's a standard. So when other people come and look at it, or when you come and look at it later, you'll know what you're looking at when you find it. If you give it some kind of fancy name or like a code name of some kind, it might be hard to find.
Sure.
So consistency is really the key. Using standards or conventions make it easier to work with other people, and static kind of is convention. So
Remind me,
Yeah.
yesterday we created some stuff in styles, right?
yep, this subdirectory is static. Yep.
Yeah, and then we reproduced it in the static main and added styles to static main.
Yep. And collect static did that as well. So what collect static does is it finds all the directories called static, and then it just grabs everything inside of it, and it puts absolutely everything inside of static main that's inside of it. So
So is there anything actually in the static directory?
this one right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, these things are in it. The style subdirectory and the main styles.css. These are the ones you work on when you make changes and develop things.
Right.
These are the ones that get served when you actually run the site. That's the real difference here.
Oh, okay.
But they both exist at the same time. I want
All
to
right.
make sure everybody's really clear on that. Does that make sense to everybody conceptually? That why there's two
So
directories? Like
when the program runs, it calls upon the ones that are in static main, right?
yes.
And the ones that are in static, that's just kind of your sock drawer where you keep stuff when you don't need it, right?
Yeah, these are more like working files. They're gonna be the same when you push it all up to production. You run everything and you run collect static. What it does is it takes the latest version of all your files and puts them in here. So any
Okay.
files that haven't been changed, it won't update on collect static, but any files you do change or add or do anything to in a static directory will get collected to static main. And then at the time you run your site, Django's just going to come to static main to look for static files. It won't look at these static directories when the site's running.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, now I get it.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? This is admittedly a confusing part about how this works. So if you're still a little confused on it, don't feel bad and ask questions. But nothing else will keep going. Go ahead.
Jeff, what queues it up? What tells static main to update when you made an update in static?
Mhm.
What tells it to? Do you have to do a save button, or what is the magic there?
Yeah, so that is the collect static command. So there's a really common, like so when you make a change to the main.styles, you have to save it. right? And then once you save that change, there's a really common functionality that can be done in all kinds of systems that just compares the differences between two files. And so what it does at some point in there, and I haven't really, but again, you can absolutely go and read the collect static documentation. It'll say exactly how it does it. But at some point, what it does is just going to compare this directory and this file and its full path to anything that matches it here and see what the differences are, like line by line. And if they're
After you've
different, yeah,
after you've submitted and saved your changes.
yeah,
then it
after you run
runs.
collect static. So the command collect
Right.
static is what does that. Yeah. So you save the changes here where you work, and then collect static is going to do that comparison, and anything that's changed, it'll just replace the file.
Is your brain and fingers are the automatic save button. You have to type it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is no, that's what you're looking for is
Yeah.
when I save this file, will it do it for me? No.
No. And collect static is a step that's really easy to forget when you're doing Django development, and you'll be worried about how you're lining stuff up on your site and doing all these things, and you'll go back and look and it's not working, and you're racking your brain about your CSS or your JavaScript, and you just forgot to collect static, right? So it's an annoyingly easy step to forget, but it's crucial. Cool. And we are going to do it again, at least a couple more times. We're in the front end development side, so we're going to do it today as well when we add the JavaScript piece to it. But again, I want to make sure that the why and kind of what we're even looking at here, because I know the redundancy in particular is confusing, especially when you go and do the Django tutorials and stuff like that, which I encourage you to do. It's just it's really confusing why, for example, this is called my site and the top level is called my site. It took me forever to even understand. It's like, why are we doing that? But then the first time I did a project and I didn't name them the same thing, it confused everybody else I worked with. And then I was like, oh, well, that's why we do it. So, I want to make sure that we're really landing on as much of the why as we possibly can before we rifle through the next stuff. And I do want to go through the things we want to go through, but you should all have the documentation that I sent. So if we spend more time talking about why and making sure we're clear on things than we do writing the code in class, that's totally fine with me as well. So if you're still thinking and you got more questions, please throw them out. But if nothing about that nothing about that, we can dive into the framework that we're going to start using today. So let's do that. So this is our structure again. We're gonna do a couple of things before we get into the JavaScript and the new collect static and all that stuff that we go around. We're gonna be mostly working in our base.html file and making most of the changes that we're gonna be making today are gonna be in there directly. Before I get into that, I'm gonna go over to our free coding resources and show you where this is and how you can access it. The Bootstrap, the framework that we're gonna be using today. So in the free coding resources, if you just go down to the kind of the reference and documentation side, you scroll down to that, and it'll be down here a little bit under this Mozilla, which is also really good for front end stuff. It's like the guys that do Firefox, and they've got all kinds of web standard stuff. But right underneath that, there's this Bootstrap section. It has the Get Bootstrap URL. So I'm just going to go to that and go to their page. When we get here, what's super common when we come to any of these sorts of things is they'll hit you with like, oh, hey, run this command. That's real easy. And there's like, hey, do it this way. There's all these options. Like you could do it that way. You could do it this way. What we're going to do is this CDN. It's from a content delivery network, and there are a number of ways to get to it, but this is the one that we're going to use. So we're going to include via CDN. And the reason we're going to do that is because it's like the simplest way to plug this in. All it's going to be is this one line of code that we have right here that we're going to copy and we're going to put into our HTML. But before we do that, I'm going to come back to this and just grab that. But there's other really cool stuff in here that if you want to get started, when it says read the docs or any like quick start or any of those, I'm going to open that in another tab. This is going to have full sets of examples and information. So if we want to start here and say, okay, like how do we get going with this thing? How do we get started? I don't really know what I want to do. It's going to walk you through the CDN implementation. So we're going to follow these quick start steps. And the first step is create a new index.html. Just got to remember you had that question about why we call it index. This is, again, just convention, and here it is. So this is why I was using it. Terms like project root, you're going to see this all the time in documentation, is what people call things. So we already have our index.html file. We already have it in our project root. And if you look at their example file in here that they're encouraging you to copy and use, it looks a lot like ours. Right? We have the same sort of elements. We got this doc type thing up here. We had specified with English. I didn't put this meta tag in, but does anybody remember what this tag or know what this tag might be doing for us. What is this doing? If you look at this, it says char set UTF-8.
This is like a font format or something, right?
It is. We talked about it in day 1 of class. What is UTF-8? Anybody remember?
No, I don't remember.
Like universal text format or something like that. I
Yeah.
think it's an 8-bit
Yeah.
version because they have a UTF-16,
Right. And
UTF-32, I thought. But
why would we, and we talked about it when we talked about UTF-8, why would this be something you might include on your website?
well, it specifies the number of the character elements that the website can expect to have to respond to a render.
Okay. Like take it a step further. What is
Like
UTF-8?
whether it's going to be Chinese or it's going
Yeah.
to have all these other characters in it, right?
Exactly.
So it's not just about
Emojis,
English, because
emojis
ASCII
and
covers
non-English
that.
characters. Yes, there you
Yeah.
go. Exactly. That's what we're
So
looking for.
this is a buildup
Yep.
of ASCII into
Yep.
an additional, it's got German, it's got,
Yep, exactly. So we can put that in optionally if you want to. I think it's a good idea too. But again, you see, this is what we mentioned before about boilerplate standard stuff. And here's that same thing that we wrote manually about the viewport. Remember, we did that last time. So this is what Bootstrap recommends of doing in HTML, just a blank beginning, or not blank, but like beginning boilerplate thing. We've already done that. So what we need to get is just this link tag that's in here. I'm just gonna copy it from here, but you could, on this CDN. Well, I was copy it from here. The CDN, include via CDN. It has just a link tag all by itself. This is the only piece we need since we already have our HTML. So if you already have HTML and you go to a front end framework and they say, hey, install at a package manager or via CDN, CDN is going to be this kind of thing. And we're going to break down a little bit what that means once we copy it over. But so I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that to my clipboard. I got this one line of code, this link tag. Again, if you're looking at the whole thing, it's in context. We're going to take it and put it into our head element, just like it is here. So let's go do that. I'm going to go back over to my files in Python anywhere. Going to our my site and then templates.
Hello, this is the callback you scheduled with Apple.
And then our base.html.
Okay, this is the one that says link here. That's the one.
On the Bootstrap thing, yes, you want the one that says link. Yep.
Okay.
And if you're looking at the full page, yes, so in the whole head elements right under the title, it says link. And you want that whole tag.
Whole thing. Okay.
Yep. The entirety of it. That's why maybe it's easier to copy it here where it's just by itself. And you hit the little copy button and get the whole thing. It's pretty long. We're gonna break it down on what those parts are. But so all right. So once you copy that, you navigate to your base.html. Remember, we have our link tag here. And it's going to be very similar. And I'm actually just going to add it in addition to our link tag because, why not? So it's pretty long, but let's go through this real quick and see what all these elements are because they're not, there's a couple of new ones. It's a good idea to, again, understand what it is we're doing, not just blindly paste things in. So we have an href, which we've done before. So this is we did an internal href. So that's a hyperlink reference inside of our own project files. So we did the static directory and then we did the styles main, which we were just talking about, that whole interaction. This is it being included. But since we're using a CDN, content delivery network, the href is going to point to an external site on the internet. So it's going to be using HTTP that we've seen before already. So there's just a straight URL to another place on the internet. And it's going to start with this that says that it's a content delivery network. It's going to have a whole bunch of stuff which should look familiar. This is just directories, right? It's just a directory showing a file, a CSS file. So this is, again, files and directories. There's nothing else happening anywhere on the internet but files and directories, right? So this right here you'll see a lot too. I just want to call this a min. That means that it's minified or made smaller. So in CSS and JavaScript, the spacing and stuff that we do when we read it and write it as humans doesn't matter to the computer. It just breaks it down into one line. So it's a minified version. It takes a little bit less space. So you'll see that often as the kind of thing for JavaScript and CSS front end stuff a lot. They'll minify it to make it smaller. This shows the relation of this file that we're talking about, this source sheet to our sheet right here. So we're saying what it is. It's a style sheet. And then the next thing is this really long integrity tag. Now, this is a security feature, and it uses this thing called SHA-384. We're not going to talk about this hashing, but it's a hash. That's what this is called. And we're not going to, in a cryptography class, we're not going to talk about salting and hashing passwords or those sorts of things. Basically, what this is doing is it checks to see if there are any changes in the file that you're referencing, right? The CSS file. If there are any changes in it since the last time this thing was made. And if there are, it might be malicious and it won't let you access it. So I'll say, okay, don't do that. So there's a matching that happens between this and another part of the hash somewhere else that matches it up and makes sure it's legit. So it's important to keep that. And then the last thing that's included in this tag is something called cross origin. It's labeled as anonymous. And so this is saying, yeah, similar security sort of feature. It's basically saying that this is trusted, so that this connection should be considered, like this content should be considered part of this project like everything else. So when it's going between the server and the browser, it's as if it's coming from the same place, is what this is doing, is what this is telling us. So it's like considering it trusted. So this is how content delivery networks can be accessed. That's it. We've put this in here, and now we can use it in the same way that we use our own CSS once we move it to a different file and reference it this way through a link. Remember, all we did was we put our class names. This was our custom green background class name that we put. And let's go to I already have it open. Let's go to my site. So just a refresher where we are. So here's the custom CSS that we did. This is what our site looks like now. It's really plain looking, really bland. Everything looks like it's 1980, 1995 or something like that. But we can navigate between the pages. We got these buttons. This about one is green because we have the green background thing on it, which was in our custom CSS. So now that we've hooked this up, I'm going to save this. But we should be able to reference pre-written classes that are already in here. So before we go through referencing and showing some examples, we'll go back to the documentation on this, get started, and kind of show you what I'm talking about. So this, from the very introduction, very beginning, is how to hook it up. We did those steps. We're done with it for now. It shows you how to hook up JavaScript. We're not going to use the JavaScript from this framework. We're going to write it ourselves, but pay attention that it's in the body tag. I'll highlight this again later, but that's the only real difference here is you could copy and paste the stuff here, but it doesn't go in the head tag. It goes in the body tag. But over here on the left-hand side, this area of the documentation is going to be where you really see what the value of these frameworks. So we go down to like layout. There's a bunch of stuff about containers and all kinds of different things you can do. Scroll down a little bit. There's content, there's forms. These are all useful things, but components is really going to be the fun part because there's going to be all the stuff that's built in and you can mess around with, and you're going to be able to just slap into your site. So behavior like this right here is an example. See how these menus go up and down? It's called an accordion. It's kind of moving around.
How do you get the listing, the menu on the left to show up?
This is just on the website when I go there, man. I'm not sure. Just gotta get the right screen size, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Let me try it.
But so the code, once you select a thing, the code for that is right here underneath it. So you can, it's literally how you reference these things. And you'll see that oftentimes it's just classes. So here we have H2 class, accordion, header, right? This div element, we'll talk a lot about those soon. We're gonna use those as well. But this is an example of why frameworks are so great because you can grab all kinds of different things, useful, common things like alerts. This we're gonna do in just our own JavaScript, and we're gonna learn how to do it. But this is similar to what Michael, you were asking about. So here is a built-in using the framework alert button. So I click the button, it says, nice, you triggered the alert message. And here's the code for that. And you can grab that and you can just use it. So we could just slap that in there and kind of be done with it. But we're going to go through explicitly writing a little more JavaScript and show kind of what these things do. But this is what a framework is going to give you, is the ability to just do these things by referencing largely classes and sometimes IDs, like we mentioned. So here's class and ID.
Okay. So oh God, somebody's singing.
No, you're
Okay.
good. What's up?
Okay. So the way that JavaScript, so the way that the links that we just copied from Bootstrap, right?
Mhm.
That's where you get over here and it recognizes this JavaScript instead of Python. And
Oh no, that's just don't so slow down. Sorry, I don't want to confuse you. It's good. I'm glad you're asking. So all this is doing is giving us the ability to, what we're doing right now is CSS, right? So it's the framework is going to be able to give us the same way that we did before. We just use classes to give us behavior from here, right?
okay.
So the only thing that in this Bootstrap documentation that I was showing you is that any behavior that you want to find, doesn't matter what it is, like if handling images or whatever the case may be, it's typically going to be just adding classes to things
Okay.
from here. And now that we've included this link, we can reference it just like we reference our own CSS as classes, and that's it.
Oh, so it's
that's
just
the
like
main
another
concept.
source, another bucket.
Another source for CSS, right? That's all frameworks are, right? So we just plug that in now. It's another source. We could grab those things directly and just do stuff with it. So let's do some of that now. So here's our site, right? It's kind of crap looking. So we'll make it look better with just a few class references on directly on the tags like we did before. So we're going to add a couple of things to the base, or I'm sorry, to the body tag itself. So we're going to add a class to it, right? So I've mentioned this before. We need classes a lot. And we're going to change the background so it's not just this white background, and we're going to make it dark. Right? And then we're also going to make the text dash light. And these are built in. So these are the sorts of things that you'll look up and you'll decide which classes you're going to use based on the design of the site you want to make and you know what you're going for in the end. So this is added to the body tag is going to affect everything on the page. So this should make the background no longer just white. I'm going to save it. I just saved it, and I'm going to reload the server side just to show this one simple change. Now, this is something, you know, we don't have to run collect static because we just done changes in our HTML, and that's not part of our static files, right? So we've just added a link. We haven't made any changes into our own CSS files. So we're just doing HTML differences that should change things already when I come back here. And now that my site is done reloading on the other side, and it has. So now you see that we have a totally different looking page, right? Now, if you look, our custom CSS is still here, but we can't see any of that stuff. Like this about, we don't see anything in the background. It's not highlighted. The text is all changed. It's all in white. We still have our buttons. We can't really read them anymore because they only show up when we highlight, we hover over them. They still work the same way. But now by just adding two little class references, two different classes as references, we change the look entirely of the page.
Jeff, what happened to the green background?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what happened is we're no longer it didn't load this static piece for us anymore. We're not using it anymore. It's still referenced, but it got overridden by our framework. So this is something again that when you're doing a project and you're looking at things and you're making changes, you got to be careful not to try to mix and match in places because one thing might override another. So when we added our framework of CSS, it simply just overrides this. Now, there are things we could do if we really wanted to make sure we're using our custom CSS and not the framework. We could come through here and make sure that we forced it to use the right thing. But by default, what it did when we added this was it said, okay, we're using our new framework now, and that's what we have here. So the other parts just basically didn't come through. So it's called overriding. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, now I'm scared.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So
now, if we reversed those, would ours override the other one?
Good
The
question.
two links. I mean,
which
does it matter which link is first and second?
Well, I don't know. Let's find out. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I encourage you all to do to experiment with you all. Try this one because it should be quick. But this is the kind of thing that I want to, get through kind of the big what's and where's, and then you go around and play with these sorts of things and see exactly what will affect the behavior, how you would override it. And there you go. And that's it. So it's really that simple. It's because it loaded in that order. And that's also why it's important. So it's a good question. It's like, no question is a bad question. That's also why it's important. Sorry, let's go back to our full beginning part of the introduction. It's why if you use the JavaScript, for example, that's in framework, it's in a different place in your HTML, right? They put in the body tag because of that same thing, like the place in the HTML, because of the sequential control structure that computers use to read top to bottom, left to right. It's going to tell you like that order in which you use things is relevant on what's done. It's good stuff, good questions. But you see, like it still gave it the same font as everything else, right? And so did like rounded edges on the corner. So it looks way different. It's still using parts of our new framework, but it's also using our custom. Good questions, good call. Anything else about that? So that's how we plug in generally a framework and front end using a content delivery network. questions? All right. So I'm going back and I got into our developer console thing here in the browser. I right clicked and hit inspect to open this up again because we're gonna look at some of these things that are gonna be helpful here. Like we messed around a little bit before, but we're gonna do some more of it. Now again, these are our styles down here in CSS, and you see all these things that are in here for each one of these or any one of these elements. So here's a background dark call that we added, right? So we used this class, the BG dark, right? And it does, this is what it does. Here's a CSS and it does all these different things. And we don't have to write any of this. We just use it and it's great. So we just had to use the class name and here's the details of it. Then if you remember further down, here's our padding and margin and breakdown of all those sorts of things. So
Where are you finding this that you have on the
this is in the browser. I right clicked and hit inspect. And then I just scroll down on the right hand side and this stuff's built into every browser.
Okay.
And so what we're going to do is just use the framework a little bit now and space this thing out, make it look a little bit better and show you kind of all the things you could do. You can, again, just as a reminder, go into your CSS files, use the custom CSS that we have and write each of your own little pieces and lines for these things, say like box sizing and these little, you can look these up too if you want to, the little before and after is clearing. This is lots of standard CSS stuff. But what we're going to use is we're going to leverage Bootstrap and quickly make our site look a lot better. So I'm going to go back to base. We're going to reference this a lot, though, when we come back to it. I'm going to keep this developer console open to show sort of elements that we change as we do this, because it's pretty common to work this way while you're doing front-end development as well, is keeping things open in this sense while you're making changes. So before I go back and start making some more changes, let's go to some other site. Honestly, we just do it even right here in the site we're doing. So I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to inspect. I'm going to right-click and inspect. I'm going to open up our developer console for the Python Anywhere thing. Now let's open this up again because I want to show this div element. It was something that was an example in the other one, and we're going to use these two. And I want to highlight them because they're really, really, really common and they're super helpful. And what they are is it's short for division, and it just breaks up your page in a non-visual way. Like you don't usually see a div. You can, if you really wanted to, you could give it a border or something like that. But it's generally just for like grouping stuff together. So it groups together things that are similar that you want to make look and feel the same, or you want to separate them out into a different group on the page. A div is a really commonly used thing. You'll find them in almost every website out there with that's using HTML, which is most of them. So we're going to implement a div and just kind of show you how cool it is just to be able to use those and throw some classes on them and how quickly that changes the look and feel of your site. So I'll close the developer console on this one. I just want to show you that divs are really common. And let's actually set up our own div. Oh, wait, what happened here? I'm sorry. That actually ran that, and I didn't want to. Let me close this. I don't want to be opening things in that file. All right, so we're going to go, again, just a refresher. We are in our My Site. We're in templates, and we're going to be doing most of our work in our base.html, where we put in our style sheets. So I don't want to use our custom style sheets. There's a couple of ways around it. Again, we could do the order. I'm going to try commenting it out and see if that works. So what I did there is I just put my cursor in this row. I hit control and then slash, and it commented out the entire row. So it shouldn't run this row when we run it next time, because I don't want to use the ones that we did. I don't want to use the custom styling. Again, we could put it in a different order and know that it'll override it, but to make sure that we don't use it, I'm going to try to skip it this way. You don't have to. You can leave it if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and skip it. So down here, we're going to do some more changes in our body tag. Inside of that, we're going to implement the div, the division tag, because it's useful and it's going to really help us change the look and feel of things. And it's a good place to put stuff. So to do that, we're going to do the div, and we're going to open it up like this. And then before we add any classes to it, I'm going to take this closing tag, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to move it down right in front of the closing body tag, basically. Well, yeah, I'm going to put it, yeah, I think in front of the body tag would be a good place to put it. So I'm going to put it right here. And that's going to enclose all of this stuff inside of this div, right? So some separation between the entire body. Like now we've created a separation in the very, very back sort of canvas of our page. And this is going to give us the ability to make a inner container that we don't necessarily show people, but it can do things. It can move stuff. We can highlight things. And as a quick note, again, this doesn't matter for HTML on the spacing of stuff off the side like it did in Python. The number of spaces from the side makes no difference to HTML. I move things over to make it more readable for humans. And if you want to move things over in big chunks, you can highlight the whole thing, hit control, and then use your square and your opening and closing square brackets, and it'll move stuff left and right, like in chunks like this. You can move whole blocks of code over. So if you're nesting things in HTML, it's a good kind of hotkey trick to have. But so what we've done is we've wrapped, as it's called, all of our nav and content blocks inside of this div element. So all I've done is add a div tag on 13 and rows 20. All right, so now we're going to add some classes to this out of Bootstrap to make it do some things that we want it to do. And we're just going to use a very simple container class. I'm going to save that, and that's it. It's the only thing I'm going to put in there. I'm just going to make this div class container, and I'm going to wrap our nav and everything inside of it. So it's basically just containing everything on the page inside of this container. I'm going to show you what that did. So I'm going to save it, reload. And once that reloads, I will go back to the site. And as you see now, everything is kind of jammed up on the side, all the way over on the left. And when I refresh the browser, it should give us a little bit of space. Here, let's close this console. And you see that it pushed everything off the side. And there's a little bit of gap here now, right? And there's a little bit of space. The home button is just a little bit to the right. And it's kind of pushed in towards the middle. Let's go back and inspect that. And we can see now, if I highlight this thing, here is our H1, but here's our div. Let's get our div. And so we can see, if we scroll a little bit down, all the margin that it added on the side, it just added that in there. It added the border or the padding. There's no border, but it added padding and all these things automatically. So we could have gone in there and manually set these things if we wanted to and say, okay, we want a container. We want to define this container class and say that it should have 12. This is pixels, 12 pixels here and 25 pixels there. And then we could have said, all right, we want to make it change with the different sizes of screen. See, it's moving along and it's still keeping everything kind of in the middle and stacking it up like that. And you see the paddings over here on the right of my screen on the lower side. The margin is changing as I adjust the screen size. We could have manually written all that stuff to make it do all these things for us. By just adding the class from Bootstrap, though, it gets all that behavior all by itself. And all I had to write in was class container. And it makes it move in and out, right? Makes it stay kind of a little bit cooler looking than it was before. So that all making sense? Anybody have any questions about that, about how we hook up our framework? Got the word for a second, even though I've said it a million times. All right, so let's use one more thing.
Let me ask one question. On
Sure.
the one you've got showing on their screen, scroll
Mm-hmm.
up to about line 6 or something like that. Okay.
Sure.
What happens to the link that already existed before we started doing this?
What, this one right here?
Well, the one we did last class.
Yeah, that's this one right here. That's the custom CSS that we wrote and moved out to
Yeah,
emoji.
okay, that one.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
you
still here.
moved-
I commented it out, meaning the computer didn't read it. So it treated this like something it shouldn't do and just skipped it.
What if you left both of them in? Would that be a mess?
No, it's just what we did before. When we it'll either, depending on the order that it's in, run both or run one. So
But I mean, will they conflict with each other somehow?
it's what we showed just a minute ago, where the order that they are running will decide if they conflict or not, if which one overrides which, if they are both used. So if it's the order that you put them in, literally, there can be conflict potentially in running them together. So it's the order that you put them in, and if you include them both, but they will both run depending on the order again that you run them in.
Yeah, okay. The
Cool.
possibilities are endless, right?
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of things once you get the moving parts going in there. All right, so we do one more thing just to make this look better. We're going to add one other set of classes to our nav bar directly and make it look more like a navigation bar. So we're going to do nav bar dash nav. And then we're going to change the colors because, again, as we look at this site, like, we can't see these buttons up here until I hover over them with the cursor when I'm not in my developer thing. So I'm not gonna see them pop up. We don't want that. We don't want to be visible now. We know that there's buttons there, so the user can find the buttons. Like we know there are buttons there, we know, but the user can't see it. So I'm gonna put nav bar, and then I'm gonna change that background color to something else. I'm gonna do BG secondary. So it's two different class calls. You got nav bar dash nav, and then space BG dash secondary in the actual nav element itself. Set those classes. I'm gonna save that.
Hang on for just a second, while I copy
Sure,
that line.
sure.
Uh,
And then reload it on the server once you get it copied in there.
bar. Oh crap.
You not get it in there, right?
Well, the problem is, if I this keyboard, right, it's ultra sensitive, right? So
Okay.
I have a tendency to screw things up rather than,
Sure.
oh, I see what I did.
You caught anybody else stuck? This making sense to everybody else? Or is everyone else able to make your site look? Because this is the main part. Now I'll reload and refresh it. Once you get those nav elements in there, see how much of a difference that made? How it popped up the buttons are now a like full on nav bar element. And again, the choice I made for these things, why I chose nav bar nav and background secondary. So the background secondary is to change the color to make it different than the larger background. So this is lighter gray. So that made the text pop out because it's black, right? Same color as the background. So now it works. I don't have to change the color of the text. But then it's also this nav element is if I'm using a call me go back to inspect this again. We talk about different philosophies. So this would be if I was using a mobile first design. I want to design this for smaller screens. I want the buttons to be these kind of big buttons that go across the entire top of the thing. But you may not want that behavior for the larger screen. So you may want to bound this in something else. But you see that the buttons are contained within the inside. There we go. There's our div. So if you look at this, I've got the padding. Scroll down here. So that green part again is the padding. So that's the inside part of the border of our div, and the buttons go right up to the end of that. And see our text goes right up to the end of that. So we've contained those things visually on the page, but a user doesn't see it. See, this is what the user sees all the time. If they're not looking at their developer console, they're not going to see any of these greens and orange things. But this is what we've coded by using the container and then using the buttons. So the nav buttons, look in, this has their own set of padding, but that's all built in. So we don't have to specifically do this. We just have to tell, using our framework, tell it to use these classes that somebody wrote all the CSS for in Bootstrap.
Let me see this screen for just a second. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, this is the
You know,
base.html file. Anybody got questions about that, how that all works?
somehow I managed to erase my class home. Yeah, I gotta put that back in. Okay.
Wait, which one did you erase?
Well, I don't know. There's somebody see if I rest my hands on the keyboard, right? It'll go crazy, right?
Yeah,
So
don't do
when
that.
no, I know. I keep telling myself that.
Jeff, what told the container to be dynamic with whatever size? Right there in the body, all you have is container.
Yeah.
What told it to change sizes?
To do all that stuff that it does? Yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
good question. So let's see if we can find it. So here's our div that says container, right? So I've clicked on that now. And when I did, now you see this thing down here in styles over, so I'm kind of on the right-hand side where it says styles, right? So what it did was it shows all the styles involved with this container that are written. So what is happening here and the way that it does that responsively and all that stuff is written into the CSS. So all this stuff that I'm looking at here is the CSS code that says how to do all of this. And so we could have written our code, this container, we could have defined it in CSS like we did when we defined our own background classes and stuff like that to give it this cool sticking with it. But it does that the way it does it because Bootstrap wrote the CSS, and the CSS is here somewhere. So you can look at it here and see what it is that's doing it. It's using these things called breakpoints. So we said that once it goes past certain sizes of pixels, it changes, right? So you see the thing on the right adjusting as I move past about what 580 pixels, something like that, width.
That is a big file. I've gone through that file.
Yeah,
That is a big
it's huge.
file.
It's a lot. So Scott, to answer your question, the way that it does it is just CSS. So there is a CSS file that has all the different, like there's a ton of things inside CSS that makes it do that. But the beauty of the framework is that if you know that you want that to happen, if you know you want that behavior, you don't need to know how to write all the CSS. You just need to know that you could plug it in and you could grab this thing and get it to do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, let me see your file screen for just a minute.
This base.html?
That one, just hold it there for just a second. Will you?
Sure, sure. Yeah, because this is the important part right here. This is the code. So when we're doing a coding bootcamp, like this is the code itself. So I want everyone to make sure that how we accomplish the things that we're looking at visually in this file, because this is where all of it happened. There's nothing else to it really. I mean, there's CSS at this location in this directory, but and like Chris mentioned, you can hunt this down and read it. You know, you can go read all the pieces, not just in that thing I was showing you. This is available to go and read all the way down to the each class definition itself. And this, again, I sent these out, the directions in the documentation that I emailed out earlier, going to be the exact same thing. So if you're having trouble keeping up copying and typing this way, then you should be able to largely just copy and paste out of that side.
Okay, no, I got it.
Okay.
So my secret way to recover. Just close the file because it's whatever from the last time you saved, you're okay.
Yep.
Close the file and close
That'll do it.
the Python anywhere and just start it back up.
Start it back up.
Yeah,
all right.
Burn it
Cool.
down, rebuild it. Right?
Yeah, burn it down, rebuild it. And don't be afraid to do that because nothing we're doing is really hyper complex. We have documentation that'll get you right back to this point if you haven't gotten there already. So scrap it, start over. Don't be afraid to do that. It's very good practice to do that. So we're gonna do I was gonna show another piece, but again, I'm glad we're spending the time that we are on the things that we're doing. Another real like kind of quick way to put content on your site is to find content to embed on other websites. And now that you know where to plug things in, you know what divs are, you can just go to a website and embed something from there. Like, see if I can find an appropriate, thing on this site. It's called Giphy that you can grab. So let's say this one. This one looks all right. So something that you want to put on your site that looks cool and kind of moves around. You could go to a site like this one. It doesn't have to be this one, but you're looking for something that says embed. Get out of here, commercial. Killing me. So right here it says embed. And it's got this little brackets, which again, HTML brackets. So signal use HTML. So if you click on one of these things, it'll give you this code. It says copy. And then remember we talked about responsiveness and it defaults to being off, but we like responsiveness. So we're going to put it on. And see when I flip that switch, what it did is it put this into a div. So here's our old familiar div tag. And this is embed code. So we're going to say copy code. I'm just going to take this div, go back to my base. I'm just going to put it somewhere. So I want it outside of my, well, actually, I'm sorry. I don't want to go base. Let's go to, since we want it to be content, I'm going to put it on my index.html. I'm going to update this a little bit. So saying this is the index, I'm going to say like, this is my site. Then let's just put like a paragraph tag in here for something else to be here. Enjoy. And then let's take that tag that I copied, right? So it's got all this long thing in here. It's in a div like we've seen before. Let's space this down a little bit. So there's an iframe, which we didn't talk about, but that's a way that videos are commonly kind of used around. So here's another source tag that we're familiar with, and it has a link to a specific place. And it's got some style, some height and width. And then there's some other classes with the frame borders and whatnot. We're going to break down all of this stuff exactly. That's the iframe tag. See, there's nothing inside of it. And then outside of that, there's the end of our div tag. So that's the div. And then we have another P tag, which is short for paragraph. And here's an A tag, which you should be familiar with. So this is a hyperlink. We should expect to see a link of some sort on the site. And it should say in a word via Giphy, right? So this is just something I went to a site. I grabbed something that was a GIF and I dropped it in here. So I'm just going to save that. I'm going to reload it. I'm just going to show you again. If you know how to use HTML, you can do this. You can grab sort of content from a lot of places and then just drop it in, and then you'll have it on your site. So there's this thing that makes it look like someone's writing code on my site, and it has that little link that says here. Let me get out of this developer console, so I'm not just popping everything around like that. So it says via Giphy. So again, now that we have that, we can adjust this however we like. So I could take that and say, you know what, I don't want that little via Giphy link, so let's get rid of it. So I'm just going to delete that entire p tag, and so I just have the div with the iframe. So it should just be that cool looking GIF that we liked. Save and reload. And once I refresh this, it should be gone. All that stuff still pops up because they still want me to go to their site, and then you just get to Giphy anyway by clicking on it. But so those are multiple ways now that you know how to run front end things that you can simply connect stuff from the internet, from frameworks in our base, and using just the classes to change the behavior, make things a lot cleaner looking, to using embedded HTML from different sites and just dropping it in and plugging and playing to make your site look a lot better than it started with. Remember when we started, it was a blank page, and now in just a few minutes, we have it looking a lot more like a website. So kind of looking, it's not amazing, but any questions about this or how we've gotten to this point? Cool, because we're going to shift gears into the JavaScript piece. Again, I want to make sure that we're good on this up till now. What we've done is mostly CSS. It is Bootstrap framework that we use was CSS up to this point. Again, if we recall what file we got from the content delivery network, it was a CSS file. Cool. All right. So if no questions on that, I do encourage everyone to get to this point and play around with the style things. You know, it's good to make the site look like this, but it's better to make it look like your own. So, you know, use this framework, use a different framework if you want. You don't have to necessarily use Bootstrap, but play around with these things, change the look and feel. Let's do some JavaScript directly and add that functionality, Michael, that we talked about earlier. Now, again, this is something we could import, just a couple of clicks of the button and add this functionality like we did with the containers and everything else we did with the CSS in Bootstrap. We could do JavaScript from Bootstrap and do all those things. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that at all, actually, in the course. We're just going to write some directly to show how it works, where it fits, go through the exercise of writing our own static files like we did with CSS. But keep in mind that this can be very simply plugged in from that same Bootstrap site in a script tag in the same place that we're going to write our JavaScript, and you could do all of these things from them. So let's dive in. So again, we are inside of our body tag, and we're going to write this inside of the body tag. So there's the bounds of that. We're underneath the div because we don't need it to be inside of the div at all. It's not a visual element. So the things that this container gives us, we don't need for our script is what this is called. It's JavaScript, but it could be other things, typically going to be JavaScript and JavaScript. But it is if I could write in English, script tag. And I'm going to close that off, and it's going to give me the other end of it. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter, right? So inside of this script tag, just like HTML, it's an HTML tag that is telling the computer that inside of this will be some sort of script. It's going to be JavaScript. So we're just going to write JavaScript directly inside of this tag. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a function that's going to give users a confirmation, a way to confirm that they want to delete a to-do list once we make our to-do list. So when we do next week, when we do the backend development and start defining those functions of creating, reading, updating, and deleting things from our own database, we want to give users a moment of pause to say, okay, do you sure you want to do that? So generally speaking, to do that, we're going to want to know when a user pressed a button, stop that button from doing what it was supposed to do, give the user a chance to say, to confirm that that's actually what they want it to do. And if they do confirm that's what they want it to do, we then want to release the original function of the button and execute it the way it was supposed to be, as if there was, no interruption for the confirmation, right? So that's what we're doing. If they say they don't want to do it, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to exit and there's going to be no change. So that's generally the functionality that we're going to write. It's going to be very simple JavaScript. And again, the purpose of writing it directly like this is to acclimatize everybody to what JavaScript does, how we could use it into a project, how you could put it into a project that's largely Python or something else. And this is a non-contrived use case. This is a way you really use JavaScript. All right, so let's dive into this. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have to make our function that is going to give the confirmation to the user and say, what are you going to do? So the way in JavaScript that we do that, we define a function, is the word function, right? So we did this in Python with def. This is function. And then we're going to give it a name. And similar to Python, it's going to be start out with lowercase. We're going to use camel case a lot more often in JavaScript. So it's going to be confirm delete is what I'm going to call this, because we want it to be something that we can recall and it's descriptive of what it does. Open parentheses, close parentheses, just like Python. And we're going to put in event. And this is how you refer to basically anything that users do in a browser, like clicks, or it could be touch screen, microphone, any kind of input stuff that you're going to have is referred to as an event generally. So this is going to take in an event. And now we're going to enter the function definition itself. And in JavaScript, you have to do that with curly brackets. A lot of curly brackets in JavaScript. Very much more of an opportunity to forget them than there are in Python. But so now we're inside of our function definition. So we're the first thing that we want to do is we want to stop the default behavior of this event. So again, the event that we have in question in our context is a button that's been clicked, right? The delete button eventually will be a delete button. So we want to take the event that we passed, that we have from up here, right? And we're going to do dot. This is called dot notation. We're going to tell it to do something. So event dot, and then prevent default, again in capital case, all one word, or camel case, all one word. So lowercase prevent, and then capital D default. And this is a built-in thing in JavaScript that's going to do, because again, JavaScript is really for the internet, is for this sort of thing. So it's going to prevent the default behavior of this event, right? And it's similar to function in Python, where we have to call it like this with the open and close brackets with no parameters, nothing inside of it. And in JavaScript, you got to end lines like CSS and things like that with a semicolon. Cool. So now we've done the first step. We've prevented the default. When somebody clicked a button, it doesn't do anything. Now we have to confirm. So we're going to use an if statement, very similar to Python, except we got to use these open and closing parentheses to put our condition. And what we want to do is send them a built-in another piece of JavaScript that will do the confirmation interaction. That will do a pop-up on the page in the browser with confirmation buttons that'll say okay and cancel and stuff like that, all built in so that we don't have to do it ourselves. And that's just called confirm. And then we're going to pass it a string for what kind of message we want to pass it. This could be anything. And since we're doing deleting tasks, I'm just going to do delete task with a question mark. So this is what's going to pop up in a little box. And it's going to have a couple of buttons in there. And it's going to say the message that we put in here. You can put any message in here. You can say like, what are you doing? Why'd you press the button? Or are you sure you want to delete it? Whatever you like. But since we're entering another code block, this if code block, we need another set of curly brackets. So I'm going to do open and closing curly brackets. And now we're inside our function still. We're now inside the logic, the if. So this is if the user clicks OK on this confirmation message that's going to pop up at this step. So we're saying if they confirm that they do want to delete the task, what do we want this to do? So we're going to grab the window that we're looking at. The whole window is the browser window itself, the whole thing. This is again built in. So we say window, we say dot location, dot href. And this is going to grab that basically window that you're looking at. And it's going to say, all right, cool. We got confirmation. Now I want you to do what that event button thing was going to do before. So we say event dot target, because that's what buttons have. They have a target. It could be a new tab, like when you click on a tab or you click on a button on the internet, it opens up a new tab. The way you set that behavior is by setting the target of the A tag that we were looking at. You can say target is a new window, a new tab, the same tab you're in. All that stuff is dictated by what's called a target. So this is the same thing we're going to leverage. We're going to say this event, the target is going to be the href that it was before. So basically what we've done with this line of code is we've grabbed the window we're looking at after confirming from the user that they do want to delete the task. And we said, okay, the place you're going to go now is the place that this thing was going to send you originally before we stopped you for confirmation. All right. So again, this is in the documentation. So if you don't know how to produce this off the top of your head, that's all right. I really just want to show you that this is how a JavaScript function is built. This is really similar to Python. It shouldn't be vastly different than what we've looked at so far. And hopefully it largely makes sense in the logic in what we've done up to now. Does this all making sense? Anybody totally lost?
I get it.
Tracking?
Yep.
All right. All right. Cool. So next thing that we've got to do is we've got to assign, or we've got to find all of the buttons on our page that are delete buttons. Not every button is going to be a delete button. We're still going to have navigation buttons. We're going to have submit buttons for making new tasks. We're going to have all kinds of other buttons out there. And the way that we grab these things is by classes. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for all the things that are labeled as a delete button class in our page. So to do that, we're going to grab in a variable, and in JavaScript we use var for variables, and then we're just going to give it a name. So we're going to say delete buttons, and we'll set it to something. And this we're going to take the document, so that's the HTML document. So it's different from the window. It's not the whole space on the window browser that you're in. It's the document inside. So the HTML document on that page. Say document dot, and that's a really common pattern in JavaScript. The document, there's something dot do something, right? So on the document, inside of that, what we're going to do is query selector all. This is a really common way to grab all the stuff off of a web page and do something with it. So this is going to take everything off of the web page that fits our criteria. So query selector all is all one word, camel case, so lowercase q, capital S, capital A. And then we're going to say the class that we want to get. So dot, and we'll call it whatever we want because we haven't actually made this class anywhere, but we're going to use button delete because this is going to be delete buttons. We're going to apply this class to delete buttons. And so when we see it in our HTML, we're going to want to know what they do and make it a logical sort of class name that we can reference. Great. So this part of our script is going to go to the document. It's going to query or look for all of the things that match our criteria. And the criteria we give it as a string is just the class name. Strings are done in JavaScript just like in Python between quotation marks. All right, so the last thing we have to do is, now that we've come up with this function that says, all right, do the confirmation, do the thing once we got the confirmation, do nothing if we don't have a confirmation. We have a way to find all of our delete buttons and group them together into this variable delete buttons. Now what we need to do is loop through this and execute, like look for each one of these to be clicked. So now we have this set of buttons. Not all of them are going to be clicked at once. We have to somehow listen, is what they call it. Listen for the event of a click. So we're going to loop through this element and add a listener to each button that's labeled as a delete button. And that's going to give us the ability to then call this function each time they're clicked. And the reason we're walking through this logic is because this is very, very common. And this is what's happening when you hook up a JavaScript framework, right? So this is the like explicit step-by-step kind of what's going on under the hood, right? It's good to know how to do these sorts of things. So delete buttons is the name of this thing that we're using. So we're going to do some stuff to it. So following the same pattern we've done a couple of times now is delete buttons dot. And the way they do loops in JavaScript is you dot for each, right? So we did for loops in Python, and totally this is the first kind of big difference in syntax. So we do the thing that we want to loop through, the iterable, and then we do dot and for each. And now we're going to say what we want it to do for each of these things. So inside of our parentheses, we're going to say, what do you want to do with each of these things? Now, each of these things, we're going to run a function. This is what's called an anonymous function. I'm not going to give it a name. So it's not something that's going to get called by name anywhere, but it's going to be called each time this, for each element that's in this delete buttons, right? So I'm going to define another function that's going to run on each button inside of this thing, right? So Very similar patterns to what we've done in Python, but just written a different way, right? So this is the syntax of JavaScript doing the same things that we did in for loops in Python. This is a for loop in JavaScript using a function that's going to do something to each button that's in here. Now, since this is a function and we're in JavaScript, we got to do curly brackets. It's not going to be a crazy function, so don't get too freaked out. This is the last line of code we're going to write in JavaScript, and then we're going to be done with it. So we're going to do button because we have each button that we're doing, right? So this is the thing that we're passing, right? These are all variable names. This button, this delete buttons, these are variable names. It could be a lot of things. For each of these buttons that we go through in the delete buttons group, we're going to add event listener, also built into JavaScript. So lowercase add, uppercase event, uppercase listener, all one word in camel case. And that's a built-in function in JavaScript. So it's going to do what I said before, where it's going to listen, as it's called, for a certain event to happen. And then it's going to do a certain thing if that event happens. So this outer anonymous function is taking each button and it's adding a listener to it. So it's just adding this ability to wait for someone to click it and then do a thing once it's clicked. So this is where we're making that happen right now. So we're going to tell it what kind of event to listen for. And it's the string click. So I'm going to say you're listening for a click as opposed to some other kind of input. There's all kinds of different things you can label in here, but we're waiting for someone to click the delete button. And we are going to do what once they do? We want to run our confirm delete function. So all we're going to do is tell it here as the second parameter to this add event listener function is the name of our custom confirm delete function. So we tell it what event to listen for, which is a click, and then we tell it what to do once that button is clicked. And what it does is it's going to confirm delete. So that is going to pass the event to our function up here. That event will have its default prevented. It will then confirm with the user. Do you want to do that? If it's confirmed, it will send the window to the place that it would have done it originally. So this is the total flow of what we're going to do to have a button that confirms that we want to delete our task. Everyone fairly clear on that flow and how we constructed that and this general syntax in JavaScript. Any questions about that before we try to run this and see if it works?
Just a series of just one function runs another function, right?
Basically, yeah. So like, you know, this variable is going to grab everything. This is going to run through and add our custom function to each of them. And then once we click it, this function is going to run. So it's a little basically application. It does a full flow of things given an input, and it gives the user some sort of functionality.
Okay.
All right, we're fairly solid on this. Again, I don't expect anyone to be like, I'd much rather you spend your time learning Python syntax. JavaScript is definitely worth it to learn. It's okay to learn both at once, but I also just want to show you that it's not so different that it should be terrifying if you see this somewhere or you use it somewhere. It's really similar stuff to what we've already done in Python. It's doing a lot of the same stuff, written somewhat differently. But the logic, the flow of things, those are the broadly applicable. Doesn't matter what language you're doing. It's going to do some similar things. There's inputs, there's outputs. You're always concerning yourself with those things. All right, no questions. We're going to save this. Again, as questions come up, let's go ahead and throw them out. All right, so the next thing we got to do now is we got to add this class to something to get it to work. And so we don't have any of our tasks yet, and we don't have any tasks to delete. So let's just run this on something since it's not actually going to delete anything either. Like, again, this is just confirmation. We're going to build the delete function another place, another time. We'll do that later. But we need to assign this class to something and use it somewhere. So in the same way that we've done everything else, we're just going to apply this class to one of our A tags. So let's put it on our about page A tag as just a class like anything else. So I just copied this button dash delete. And I'm going to put it up here next to our button call inside the quotation marks for the class. So now I've added it to our A tag for what me is on line 16. It's on our about A tag. So I've given it button delete. So now that's the only thing that's on the page that should be found when this query select all is run. And it should do all the things that we had to do. So I'm going to save, reload the code on the server side. Let's go see if that confirmation works in JavaScript. See if it runs. So I'm go over here, refresh my page, and we still have our navigation up here at the top. We still got the GIF. Everything looks like it's good. Now, when I click on about, the expected behaviors, it should pop up with some kind of thing that says, hey, do you want to do that? Right. So I'm going to click about. And there we go. So it says hired labs. So it gives you the name of our URL. Pythonanywhere.com says delete task. There's our little warning thing that I wrote in there, and I got an OK and I got a cancel button. So I expect this to do, if I hit a cancel button, it should just take me right back to where I was and do nothing. So I'm going to try that first. This is like the null behavior. So I hit cancel. There we go. Looks like nothing happened. I'm back where I was. I didn't go anywhere. So let's try hitting OK. So I hit about again. Really want to delete task, and we're not actually deleting a task, but that's all right. I'm going to hit OK. And it should take me to the about page. And it did. So because that thing is linked to this button, it's still going to give me that warning here, right? Even though I'm on the about page, it doesn't know that. The JavaScript has no idea where I'm at when I click that button. It's not looking at that. Again, the JavaScript's only looking at the buttons on the page, and the page is here, and this button is labeled as the delete button. So if I hit OK here, it's not going to, it's technically going to send me to the same place, but I'm starting that place. So it's not going to do anything. It's just going to be here. But you saw a little globe up by my site kind of shift, maybe. So it did do something. But we can go back to home and there's no warning. So it didn't hit that one. But this pops up each time. And to get to the about page, we now have to confirm that we want to go there. So.
Okay, so the about the exact, it's a stand that the layout of that little pop-up, right?
Mhm.
Is standard. So that's in your function button here.
Yeah, so that is all like this whole thing, how that looks and all that stuff. Like I'm just using what's built into JavaScript. And again, since JavaScript itself is made for the internet, it's got all that stuff like alerts and all that stuff built in. There's like a more direct way that we could have done that using something actually called alert that does that thing that's built in. But this confirm right here is where that is. So if you looked up JavaScript confirm, there'd be documentation that explained exactly what it's doing to do that little window, but all that stuff standard. So I didn't have to say like what the OK button looks like and what the cancel button. Like, it just uses what's in the browser.
You don't have to build it all from scratch, right?
Nope. I didn't have to. All I had to do was write what message I want this thing to give.
Okay.
Right. The delete task. I can make that whatever I want it to be. But I'm really just using with this confirm call is all that stuff, all those, the whole pop-up functionality and all that stuff just built into it.
Okay.
And that's, again, typically what JavaScript is best for is for internet browser type things. So this is just one very small example of what JavaScript can do and what it's used for. There's all kinds of cool dynamics that the JavaScript can do. And a lot of those accordions and carousels and moving and stuff like that. Most of that's going to be JavaScript.
Okay.
Right. So we can absolutely write it all ourselves and do it here. Or you can, again, grab a framework like Bootstrap, get the functionality you want.
I vote for the easy way.
Yeah, but sometimes you can't find something that does what you want it to do, and you have to do it in like change it a little bit manually. So it's good to know where it is and how it goes and sort of like what you want to do. And then it's, really not that hard. But I agree, easy ways are better. And a good programmer is lazy and you're looking for easier ways to do things. So 100%.
That's why I know I'm going to be good at this.
All right. So the only other thing I really want to do today was just a quick kind of refactoring of this and move it into a separate static file, because that's typically what you're going to do with scripts. At this scale, this size, we could absolutely leave this here. And, you wouldn't have to put in a new file, but I want to go through that practice and highlight that, again, this is going to be a project level static file. So we go back to our tree. We don't have any, application level static file. We don't have any yet. There's no static directory underneath our to-do directory. We only at this point have project level ones, right? So this deleting a task confirmation is only relevant to the to-do list. So the script should be in here for us to maintain it in a project. As projects get bigger, you're going to want to have your own scripts, your own styles and stuff inside each application. Because imagine if we had, say, I don't know, a reservation application where you can reserve a table at a restaurant or something like that, and you want to have delete function for a reservation. You don't want to pop it up and saying delete task each time, because that's not going to make sense. People are like, what do you mean task? But you still might maybe want to have your task application or something like that. So again, there's reasons you want to keep static files and static directories and stuff separate in each application that you're running. And the static files, the scripts that we're going to set up this time, the scripts directory is going to be a place where you can hold not necessarily JavaScript. Like in our project, we have Python scripts in scripts that are running in the same way that this JavaScript can run. So This setup is going to be a way you can run any kind of external script, not just JavaScript, but it's going to be very similar to what we did with CSS. So we're just going to make a new file in a subdirectory of the to-do application, and we're going to move the JavaScript we just wrote into that. Since it's refactoring, the warning should still work the same way when we're done. But this is going to be a pretty quick setup following the same patterns we've done before. I'm going to clear this up so there's a little bit more space. But I'm going to do this as kind of a string of commands like I've done before here in the command line. You can absolutely use Python Anywhere's GUI to make these directories, subdirectories, and the file that we're going to make. But we're going to make a confirm delete.js file inside of our to-do soon to be static directory, right? But we don't want to, I'm sorry. So here we go. So we're going to make this directory. So we're going to do this the quick way right here in the console. And so I'm going to make to do that exists so I can tab complete and make sure that we're there. We need to make the top level static directory first because there isn't one. If you recall, we haven't made a static directory in there yet, and it needs to be called static to be found by JavaScript or by Django to be brought into the main static directory. So makedir can make several directories. So we're inside of that static directory. We're going to do to-do static, and we're going to make a scripts directory. And then we're going to use the 2 ampersands because I'm going to give it another one. So I'm going to say complete those 2 commands, and then do this other command. And I'm just going to use touch to make another file inside of that. And it's going to be inside of the to-do static scripts.
Touch, is that touch slash to do?
Nope. Touch, then just space. Here, sorry.
Space. Yeah.
That made it worse. Yeah. Yeah. Touch, then space. So I'm on 2 lines now because I'm zoomed in, so it can be read. So it's touch space, and then the name that I want. So to do /static /script / and I'm going to do confirm -delete .js because it's a JavaScript file. When I hit enter on that, it should have, I'm going to go ahead and just hit up to get my tree command back and have a look. So here's our confirm.delete or -delete JS inside of our static scripts directory inside of our to-do application directory. All right, so we just made that.
I'm getting a touch.
All right, man, if you get stuck on that, do it in the GUI because doing it by touch exactly is not the focus of this. So if you get stuck there, then you can make directories in the files here and just
Okay.
write the name of the directory. That totally works as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this stuff out. I'm just going to cut it out of here. And I'm going to go over and put it into that file that we just made. So I'm just going to cut this out of here in my base.html right out of the script tag, but I'm going to leave the script tag because we don't need that part. Let's go ahead and save that. And then open this in a new tab, keep everything open. All right, so now in our to-do directory, static, and again, if you didn't make that on the command line, you can make it right here. Just write static, and then go into it, and then write scripts up here in the new directory, and go into it, and then make this confirm -delete.js right here on this new file line. Once you hit new file, it'll take you straight here automatically, and we're just going to paste in that JavaScript that we wrote, and that's it. That's all we got to do. I'm gonna clean this up because it looks nasty, but again, JavaScript doesn't care. This isn't going to break like Python. This is going to be minified, like I mentioned, the CSS does, and put into one line at runtime. So this is just for humans to read. JavaScript could care less about the spacing of these things. But it's going to annoy me, even though we're probably not going to look at this again. And so I'm going to move it over. All right. So there we go. So I'm going to save this.
Go through one more time how you do that thing where you move the whole block.
Just select the whole block, hold down Control, and then use your square bracket keys to move left and right.
Oh, okay.
Got it?
Yeah. Select.
Cool. All right. So the last thing we got to do is connect these because now we've done similar to what we did before when we refactor something and move something out like we did with this link. We're going to have to connect it. So we're going to use this script tag, but we're not going to have the script inside of it. So we can to save space, just pull this together. There's not going to be anything on the inside. We move the script to somewhere else, but we now need to connect it just like we did the CSS through the link, right? Except we're going to use an internal link like we did when we did our own custom CSS. So real quickly, we're going to do the same sorts of stuff that we've done before. We're going to tell it what type of script this is going to be. So it's going to be text JavaScript. I can't spell JavaScript apparently. Text JavaScript, just to let it know what it should be expecting. And then we're going to give it a source, right? Not an href, a source, but very similar to our href pattern. We use Django's template language with the open curly brackets, percentage sign. I'm going to close it so I don't forget, percentage sign, close curly brackets. And then inside, we're going to do a similar reference to static, which is, as we recall, our main underscore static directory at the top level. So when we do collect static, it'll grab all those things. We have to say what directory underneath that. And so that's going to be our scripts. And then we remember we called it confirm-delete.js. I'm going to close that with a single quotation mark, right? So there's a path to our thing using the static directory that we were using before. Save. And then a quick note while this is reloading about naming conventions. So I named this confirm-delete, and I have this open up here, but even if I close it, I don't remember. The reason we use really descriptive names, like, again, don't overthink it and confuse yourself by calling this some sort of clever code name. Call it the thing that it does so that you can reference it and be consistent, right? So use some sort of consistent pattern. Dashes in between things is really common. A name for what it is the thing does is very, very common for scripts. So now we've done this, we moved it over. We've saved it. We're going to collect static. We have to run the collect static command back in our console because we did add a new static file, right? So back in our console, again, if we look, since we ran, this is the old tree command, and here's our top static main that we know is the static reference from before. We don't have our scripts directory. We don't have styles. All right, we only have styles and admin. We don't have our scripts from ourselves. So let's clear this and let's run our collect static. So 3 manage.py collect static. And it's going to do what we mentioned at the beginning of class. It's going to give us that confirmation because the static main directory is not empty. So it says, hey, there's stuff in there. You're going to overwrite it. You really want to do that? Yes, we do. And it'll tell you again how many static files were changed. The question earlier, like, how does it know? It compared differences in the file structures and the names. So again, if you name things exactly the same all the way across the board, you might run into conflicts when you get to this part and it'll say, hey, there's more than one thing named this. So you got overwritten. But we copied on one static file. It should be our JavaScript. Let's have a look by just running our tree command. I'm pressing up arrows to get the tree command. And so now when I look at my static main, we have our static, or we have our styles, but above that we have our scripts with our confirm.js now. So it did copy it over the way we expected to. That is the file that was copied. And then let's go, since we did that, we're going to reload the source code on our server just to make sure. I'm not honestly positive that you need to do that after running collect static, but it's a good habit. Just anytime you make a change to server-side code, reload it to your server, and then refresh your browser on this side. It didn't break, which is good, but let's see if the about button still gives us that warning. And it does. So it says delete task. If I say okay, takes to the about page. Still works here. The cancel works, doesn't take me anywhere. So that is the class for today. That's exactly what we want to get by the end of today. We've done a ton to update the look and feel of the site. When we started today, it was just flat white with nothing, and now we have what looks more like a website. It's, again, a lot to be done to make it look better. I would love it if you all played with your websites and made them look not just better, but different, unique in some way, and do your thing with it. Use some JavaScript. We're going to go next week through our own application and add another navigation thing up here to our to-do app and actually make the app itself with the back-end pieces now that we've done our front end. Before we go, I know we're at time, so does anybody have any questions before we hop for the day?
Yeah, I'm going to go through the documentation and
Okay.
get my missing pieces.
Yeah, missing pieces. And yes, absolutely. Rely on the documentation, copy and paste that stuff is totally, there's no shame in doing that. Writing it by hand is good practice, but copy and paste to get it running, and then make sure you can plug things in the right place. That's really the important part, is understanding what you're reading and why it's doing what it does. Cool. All right. If no questions for the group, then I'm going to stop the recording there. And if you have anything, again, that comes up between now and next Tuesday, reach out, let me know, ask questions between classes. And if nothing else, I will see you all on Tuesday.
Bye.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks a lot, y'all.